only that, also, many of our language learners, they also have to deal with the language. So it's not only the fear of presenting, but it's also the fear of not having enough language skills, which is part of the problem. But it's really great to teach presentation skills because there's something that you can do with presentation skills for teaching language that you can't do with the other skills. And because it's a prepared speech, the learners can actually prepare for it and they can learn the right, correct amount of English for it. And it's English that they will need for their subject matter. So it's really vocabulary and it's things like that that they have to use at work every day. So it's really a great thing to teach learners and really focus on. But it's great to teach all students presentation skills. And so I'm coming to you today from Philly, by the way. I'm in Philadelphia, and I'm Shelley Carroll, by the way. I didn't have to introduce myself. So we're going to go ahead, and I want to know how many of you have taught presentation skills to your students or have had them do some kind of presentation. What I find that's most common is that teachers will have their students do a presentation and speak and have like an oral kind of assessment for it, but they don't necessarily teach them how to do the presentation. So I think that's something that is really important that we show our students. Public speaking is the #1 phobia, so much that Jerry Seinfeld, if you ever saw Seinfeld, the famous comedy, he said once, at a funeral, people are 5 times more likely to want to be in the casket than actually give the eulogy. So it's kind of a joke about our fear for speaking. And how many of you, when you have to do a presentation, get really nervous or it's one of your phobias? Oh, that's really great. Giselle is saying that they have public speaking competitions at Clicida and Glass. I think public speaking competitions are fantastic for students because these are definitely things that will advance them in their career. It's something that they should get over, and it's great to get it with somebody who they trust, like their teacher, and be able to make the mistakes with you. And one of the things about public speaking that I think is really great for students is it's something that has immediate rewards and motivation, and it also support. Because after your students give a great presentation or a well-received presentation among their peers or in their work setting, then that it motivates them to learn more English. They get really excited because it's just kind of like a euphoric kind of support that you get with your peers. So I think it's something that's also very fun to teach students. It doesn't have to necessarily be so scary. But with teachers, many of them, us, we may feel, ourselves that we lack in presentation skills. But we don't have to be nervous about it. There are different things that we can learn along with the students as well. And one of the ways is we can play improvisation games. That's one way to get over fears. And that's one of the questions, how do you get over fears such as public speaking? How do you make it less stressful for your students? Well, even for teenagers, it could be very stressful. Even middle school students, I know I was doing presentations when I was very young. So one of the things you can do is play improvisation games. And do any of you all have any suggestions of improvisation games or improv games that you play with your students? And then I'll show you in the next slide some of the ones that I suggest. Oh, just a minute. Yes, that's one of them. We're playing Family Feud. Let's see how many you get on the next slide. I haven't heard the most popular one yet that I always hear about. Okay, so here's one of the ones that I have. I have Gossip, 1 Minute Debate, Yes and Reporter. But there's actually several kind of improvisation games out there. I think there's a band playing outside. Sorry about that. And Gossip. So I'll tell you what. Well, 1 minute is just a minute. I think it's the same thing. And basically, what you do is you have a hat, and you have a hat of different topics, and it could be something such as it could be something such as, well, anything that relates to your student. So it could be something such as, should we wear school uniforms? It should be something that really just relates. And you may want to watch out with things that are too controversial, because then that means that they could really get offended by things. So we do have to, you can always have your students write in a piece of paper at the beginning of the class what they feel would be a really good kind of game and a good type of topic that they want to discuss, and then throw those in a hat. They take it out, and then you can either tell them that they have to be pro for it or against it, or you can tell them that they get a choice, and in a minute they have to just do it off the top of their head. I found that this really helped me with my presentation skills. It really got me to think, and it really got me to just kind of get over the fear of speaking. Gossip. Gossip is with two people. It's not a single person one. It's two people. And what you do is you basically make up stories and you run off of each other. So for example, you might say something like, oh, did you see the other day that Angelina Jolie was at the mall? And then the other person has to come in and say, yes, she was wearing a dress. And so you make up this kind of gossip. Yes and is the same kind of concept. It's with two people, except you say anything. And then you can say something like, did you know that the Statue of Liberty has 137 steps to climb? And the other person says, yes, and also, yes, and did you know that the Statue of Liberty also has, I think, 7 spikes or something, or was given to us as a gift from Paris? So they have to go off of each other. So that's a very good one as well. And reporter is really good. It's the same thing with the topics, except when you take out a topic, then the student has to act as a reporter and has to come up with a really fun way of expressing this type of news. So these are just a very few. Another way is you can have icebreaker games. And I remember that there was actually an entire semester where I decided, just to shake things up, that I would do a different icebreaker for every class with my adult students. And they really enjoyed it. It was a really great way to start the class, have fun, and kind of walk around and talk to each other. So it was really good for them, especially after being at work all day. One of the ones that I've seen is I've never. I love to play this one. And this is where the students have to say something that they've never done, but they have to make it to where everybody else has also never done it. So what you do is everybody who has done it raises their hands. And I've seen it played different ways before too. Sometimes they have, for example, they might say, I've never jumped out of an airplane. Well, if everybody else has jumped out of the airplane, then that's not any fun. But then you can talk about things, because then if you have a few people who have, like, for example, if there's one person who has jumped out of an airplane, then that's an interesting discussion to have. So icebreakers are really good because they break the ice. They make it really fun. Find someone who. This is like a survey. And usually they have something very interesting, like find someone who has ridden in a sports car. Find someone who has met a famous person. And then you have different conversations because they walk around the room and they have to find someone who makes the list. Then the other thing, and something that I like to do, is I like to regroup. So I like to break them out. I like to have them complete these surveys. Then we come back, we regroup, and I say, okay, what was the most interesting thing you found out about another person? And then that's how we begin the discussion. So these can end up to be actually much bigger lessons and actually take up some time. Two truths and a lie is the most famous one. I think everybody knows this one. This is where each student comes up with 2 truths and 1 lie. And then what happens is that the rest of the class has to vote on what would be the lie. So this can be kind of tricky because you have some good liars out there. So we'll try it for now. So I'm going to tell you 2 truths and a lie, and you have to guess what the lie is, okay? So I get to meet Vicky, who is in this webinar in person this week. I have never visited Philly before, or Philly is the sixth largest state in the sixth largest city in Texas. Okay, which one's the lie? Let's see who can figure this out. Hi, well, that's not fair, Vicky. You're from Philly. Okay, so you have to guess which is the lie that I told. And inside the class situation, what I would do is I'll say, okay, if you think number 1 is the lie, raise your hand. If you think number 2 is the lie, raise your hand. If you think number 3 is the lie, raise your hand. Yes, these are all about Philly because I've been to Philly. Okay, I'm visiting Philly right now. Actually, Vicky, you can now tell us the lie because Vicky is from Philadelphia. And this lie is actually going based on my taxi driver. So hopefully he gave me the right information. Yes, number 3 is the lie then. That's very good. Okay, very good, Marcia. Marcia. Yes, Philly is the 5th largest city. It's the 5th largest city, according to my taxi driver. So, but this is my first time ever being in Philadelphia. And yes, I will get to meet Vicky, so I'm very excited about that, although I have met her before. And the next one is Deserted Island. This one's a popular one that you may have seen on leadership retreats. And basically, you say, okay, you're stuck in a deserted island. What are 3 things that you would bring with you or hope to have with you? And I'll show you my 3 things, which I have right now. So I basically, my iPad too. That would be one of them, which kind of negates the Kindle is what I've been told. And then my iPod, and then some sort of Wi-Fi system. So this would be what I take. Okay, one of the most important things we have to do, aside from giving students the opportunity to have the presentation, is to teach the process. Now, many of us may not have had, we may not have had this kind of training before. My degree wasn't in English. It was in English, but it wasn't in English, teaching English language. So what it was English, and then I had my minor in communication, so I did a lot of public speaking and training. So, oh, I met Roscoe, Camila, you're right. Well, hopefully Roscoe doesn't watch this presentation, because yes, I definitely have to take him to deserted island. So teach the process. I'm going to show you a little about the process. One of the process is, first of all, they have to know what's a good speech. I think a lot of students out there may have never seen a good speech, or maybe they have not seen many different types of speakers present. Maybe they're very used to just seeing their public leaders speak. So we don't ever know the background that they have. A majority of us have probably seen many, many terrible speeches. So the good thing about speaking is that when you see a presentation that you like, it's very okay to copy what you like about the presentation. So it might be the way the presenter presents, the way they do hand gestures, maybe something very cool like they introduce music or something like that. It's okay to steal different things from presenters. This is actually known as mimicking, and it's considered one of the best compliments when you do speaking engagements. So it's good to be able to see famous speakers and their speeches. You can see them in several websites. One of the ones, like you can see right here, this is George Siemens, and he's giving a TED Talk. So TED Talks are a very good way to introduce your students to different types of speakers. Now they have 2-minute TED Talks and 5-minute TED Talks. So these are really, really wonderful for your speakers. I like to often give them the script so they can follow along with the script. You can go on YouTube. You can get a lot of scripts on YouTube. And there's even websites that are made for English language learners, which you'll find towards the end. I'll give you a link, and then you can find the websites that have the YouTube videos, their speeches, and they have the actual transcript. So these can be entire lessons that you observe and you discuss them. When you observe, I think it's really important that, okay, so Giselle is saying that she usually does this 3 times before starting the class. I think that's a good idea, because one of those times I think you should mute it. So that way they can observe things like the nonverbal language, because the nonverbal is really important as well. Right here you can see George Siemens using his hands. A lot of times we speak with our hands. It's really good for them to notice things within the speech as well. Things such as parallelism, repetition, things that they can see on how to actually, what's included in a speech, how a speech is different from speaking with another person, and also how it's different from writing, because it's different than writing an essay. So these are ways that they can begin to start forming ideas. They can get inspired for their own speeches. And then one of the things I think is to have them create pechakuchas or pachachkas. Pachachkas are 6-minute and 40-second presentations. They're PowerPoint presentations, and they're on a time. You have very, very little words and mostly graphics. It can be in any topic, so this is really good because you can actually choose the topics, or you can have them choose from a variety of topics. So it's a really great thing for them to do their own pachachkas in class. It's 20 seconds automated, so they don't have time to really focus on one slide, but they have to keep going and going, and it's really fast, so it really prepares them for presentations. And it's short enough to where you can do a couple of these within the class. And another thing, I think a good question for us is, should they write out their speeches? And what do you all think? Do you have them write out every single word of their speeches? I think for English language learners, yeah, it sounds like somebody's name. And they're a lot of fun. You can actually see a lot of pachachkas, or sometimes called PKs, out on YouTube. And you can even find student ones because it's becoming very popular. I know Marissa Constantinides, she would share hers. She has her CELTA trainee do this so they can train for their CELTAs, which I think is a fantastic idea. I think that you should have them write out their speeches if they're beginners. And so I think, Vicki, you're right. It depends. There are pros and cons. And the reason I say beginners is because if they're beginners, then this way it really helps them figure out the vocabulary, because then what ends up happening is they don't have enough vocabulary and they really struggle with it. But I think first they write out their speeches, even at the intermediate level. Maybe at the advanced level that you don't want them to. But I think for the lower levels you would. And then after they finish writing out their speech, peer review it. Have them share with another friend, and then they can fix the vocabulary and things like that. And then have them do the note card process. And in the note card process, I think I actually put that in the next step. So this is the process that I'm talking about here. So the first step would be brainstorm their ideas, and this can be in a mind map. Have them just write it out in a mind map, like a concept map, just things that they want to have inside their different speeches. Ideas they want to include. For mind mapping, they don't need a lot of vocabulary. All they really have to do is put a single word, and then they could put the branches out for the research, for the themes, things like that. Then have them write out the speech from there. Detail it, find the right vocabulary. This way they can take the time, and this could be something they do at home. Do the peer review process so they can edit it, and also they can get feedback from their friends. Their friends might say something. I like to have a checklist, and in the checklist it gives them ideas of positive, constructive ways to give feedback, such as, do you think the examples are strong enough? Do you understand what they're saying? Is there a better vocabulary word? Just different questions like that, depending on the level of English they have. So that way they can give really constructive feedback. I don't like to accept from my students, this was good or this was bad. Sometimes they get a little lazy, so you have to egg them on and let them know what kind of constructive feedback there is. Then create note cards with main ideas. And I think a lot of presenters, if they just have the speech out, then we already know what's going to happen. The cons that you might think of are you'll get something like this if you just have them read from the speech. They'll say, oh, we're doing a presentation today, and they'll read every single word. So we don't want our students to do that because that's not a very good presentation. So I think first they write out the presentation, then they do the note cards with ideas. And then after that, they do the practice, practice, practice. The next thing is preparing the actual presentation. So this is more on the process. I was reading one of my favorite books that I've read this semester or this year. I'm going to talk like a teacher this semester. Is the Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. And one of the things that they say to do that even like the business people do that's really, really great for their ideas is that they diagram their presentations on paper. So they actually write out what they think the presentation should look like, what kind of ideas they want, and this really makes it visually, it helps them envision them giving their presentation. And I think it's really good for our students to be able to draw things out because a lot of times our students may not be able to form the words, but if they diagram it, if they draw it out, then when they get together in pairs and they compare with their speeches and their ideas and what they want to say, then they can help each other figure out exactly the right words. The other thing is to come up with concepts, then support with multimedia, images, videos, etc. So it's very important that our students, before they actually decide the visuals or the props or what they're going to do in the speech, I think the most important part is they come up with the content. And then they figure out things that will support this content. And for some things, it may be a video. For something, it may be an audio recording. It may be just a really nice image. It may be that they give a speech and they don't even do a PowerPoint. It could be they give it freestyle. It depends what their job requires. But in that case, they might want to add music. They might want to add something really exciting like an icebreaker. So I think it's very good to come up with the concepts first. And then there are things that we can do such as teach Creative Commons. It's very good that we teach our students about websites such as Flickr.com, PhotoExpress.com, which is where I get my free stock photos. And with these free stock photos, you don't even have to write them down because it's a subscription. You only get like 10 a day. So these are free to use and you don't even have to add the Creative Commons for it. But for Flickr, you do. So a lot of them that you see, you'll see one come up and you'll see how I put the Flickr Creative Commons for it. ccmixter.org has free music that you can use. And then Freesound. Freesound has also free music. Now, I also heard that there's SoundCloud, and that SoundCloud has free Creative Commons music as well, but I'm not really sure if that's the case. So you'll have to check that out. Make sure that whatever media they have, so this is what I'm really talking about when I say the process, that this is all, you can see how it's such an in-depth process here. Oh, it's the photo site is Photo Express, and it's where I got these lovely photos from. And so the media should support the message. So I think that's really important. So all of these are part of teaching the process. Now I'm going to show you some solutions that I learned from my public speaking that you may find helpful for your students as well. I'll make these a little bit bigger because it's a little bit small. But these are solutions to some common problems that I used to have when I was doing some public speaking and that a lot of your students will have. One of them is distracting hand gestures. So sometimes they're all over the place or they do something like this and your students don't realize it because they don't have any presentation skills. But the rest of the class may do it. But also, one of the things is that if they're in a business setting and you're teaching business English and your students really have to give this presentation in front of their boss and their peers, well, then it's very good that we deal with the nonverbal kind of problems that they have, which a lot of them will have. One of the things is you can keep their hands in their pockets, or you can have them do the speech with their hands behind their back. What it means is they stand still and they give the whole speech without moving their hands at all. And this will teach them to be aware of this, because once they do it the first time, then they'll be aware, okay, my hand gestures are very distracting. And this is also, after video recording them, because I think it's really important that we video record them. And if they give us permission, and we can make it private, we won't make it public. This is only for their eyes. It wouldn't even be for their students, the other students' class eyes, unless they're comfortable with it. But I think the very first time they give a speech, just say, I'm going to record it, and then I'll send it to you either in Dropbox or something like that, so they can see it for themselves. And then that can be a lesson that you give. You can say, critique yourself. Tell me some of the things that you do that you think are distracting or that you want to improve on. And trust me, students are their own worst critics, so they will definitely find things, and they'll definitely be able to tell you, first of all, what they want to correct, and then they'll be able to tell you how they think they can correct it. And this would be a very good assignment. They can even do it as an essay or a video back to you. So, and Giselle, that's a very good point, is that we have to remind that gestures do not travel. So, for example, you might have seen me do this, and that's because in Greece, if you turn it the other way, it's very offensive. I learned that while I was doing my salsa in Greece, so so yes, there are some things that are very distracting and also can be offensive even. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that is very important. Pitch, pace, volume, and enunciation. One of the ways that you can get over this, one that my teacher used to do, is she used to make us do a big fat marker, and this is actually not a big fat marker, but you would get something like a highlighter, and to give the speech completely with this in your mouth, it's very difficult to do. But after you do this, you take it out, and then you say your speech. After doing this for a minute, you're louder and you enunciate. This is very good even for pronunciation. If your students have pronunciation problems and they don't enunciate words enough, this could also even help with that. This also helps with the pitch, the pace, and the volume. They tend to get louder. But one of the things about getting louder, and I didn't put it on here, is that for them to speak with their diaphragm. So make sure that they touch their stomach when they're speaking, and they can feel their diaphragm moving up and down. And that means that they'll be able to enunciate and they won't lose their voice. If they're doing it from their voice box right here, they'll be able to hear it. And if they're giving an hour speech, then they'll tend to lose their voice. So it's very good they speak from their diaphragm, from their stomach. Distracting pacing, that means walking around everywhere. Or sometimes they do the little dance where they go tick-tock, tick-tock. A lot of presenters do that, where they go back and forth and they lean in one kind of leg or something like that. So one way to do that is to have them stand in a trash can while they present. And then they just worry. The thing about these tricks are, it gets them to concentrate more on the speech, because realistically, your students have to know their speech well. They have to have practiced that beforehand. The speech is always the first part, and then comes the hand gestures, and then comes the multimedia and the design of the presentation. So what it does here is it gets them not to do all this at once, because when you do it at once, then it becomes too much for your brain to register. So this is one of the things they can do. Distracting gestures, they can also present in a mirror. You would just be surprised. It's just like presenting in a video camera. Because when you start presenting, then you start seeing all the things that you do. And then you see, oh, what am I going to do with this hand? Or what am I doing with this hand? or my face is doing some kind of weird eye twitch, or so you get to learn a lot about yourself when you present in a mirror. Too many ums, ands, and ahs. This is where the whole class can help. This can be a lot of fun too. So what you do is you get a bell or a buzzer, and every time the student says an and or an after of course presenting the speeches for a while, is you ding them. And then after a while they'll start realizing and they'll lessen it. It'll become less and less and less. I learned this from Toastmaster and it really works. You can give them the assignment of watching a famous presenter speak and to start doing that with a famous presenter, because you can do this on TV and you'll notice it right away. Eye contact. If your students are very uncomfortable and you think they're going to freeze, then one of the things that you can do that's a good trick is have your students not look at people. What they do is they concentrate on a point in the wall above, and they can look at that spot in the wall the whole time. And while they're looking at that, it looks like they are looking at the audience. The audience cannot tell. Oh no, you're so beautiful, Marcia. The mirror will not break. So these are a few tricks that I've learned. Okay, so let me make this lower so you can see the Creative Commons for this. And you can see where it says The Last Cult of England by Franciscan on Flickr. Okay, so this is a Flickr photo that I really like. And one of the things that somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Giselle, is something about cultural references and also not to be offensive. So part of that is that you have to remind your student that the most important person to design their presentation for is their audience. So if it's going to be working peers, then that's who they want to design this presentation for. So they have to think of the audience. Is the audience going to know what they're talking about already? Then that's going to make different decisions for them. If it's going to be all one culture, then they don't have to worry things about gestures and things like that. But this is really important. I recently did a presentation keynote, and I was getting some of my feedback back. And some of the people did like the presentation quite a bit, and other people loved the material, but some people didn't. Well, actually, one person didn't really enjoy my presentation style. And I think one of the reasons is because I tend to do kind of a very bold kind of, it's really different, the American type of presentation style. So these are things to consider because not everybody in your audience will be used to this. So these are things for your students to start learning about now. And that's the end of the presentation. Sorry I went a little bit over, but you can find a lot of these links. I'll have them up within this weekend at this bit.ly address, and you can actually find all the presentation materials at this bit.ly address here. It's a live binder full of great links for the many, many different types of presentations we do here every Friday. So hopefully this helped and showed you some new things and gave you new ideas to think about. And if you would like to share right now, you're more than welcome to ask a question. And to also, I'll leave the audio. So if you want to ask a question, or if you just want to tell us like maybe an impromptu game at Icebreakers, somebody talked about a paper ball idea. So I'd like to hear about that if somebody would like to use the microphone, and you just go to the very, very top and click the green microphone, and then you can tell us about the paper ball idea. Who had the paper ball idea, by the way? Sorry, Dina. It must be really late for you in Greece, Dina. Oh, Giselle, are you able to click on the microphone and tell us about the paper ball idea that you shared? Because a lot of people really enjoyed that. Oh, okay. Is anybody else familiar with the paper ball idea that maybe could explain it? Okay. Yeah, see, at the beginning, that's what I was saying as well. That, a lot of these ideas can just be part of the process to help you even when your presentation skills. A lot of these things I learned from my speech and debate coach, who was incredible. And yes, I stood in a trash can. I talked with a pen in my mouth. because I used to have a really bad time slurring. I actually learned Spanglish was my first language. Actually, it was Shay, which is actually in linguistics. If you look it up, it's Chicano English. So I used to not be a very good presenter. It was quite terrible, so I had to do all these things. So yes, there was a point when I was videotaped, standing in a trash bag with a marker in my mouth and my hands behind my back. And that is how I came to you today. Okay, so Giselle says the paper ball idea. Students write a question they would like to ask a person. Okay, so students, let me roll this up a bit. Okay, write a question they would like to ask a person in the group on a piece of paper, and they make a small paper ball. When the teacher says battle, they have to throw the paper balls around. And when the teacher says stop, they pick up the closest one and answer the question on that paper. Oh, that's a fantastic idea, and that sounds like a lot of fun. Great idea. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing that. And okay, the cabbage game is the same thing, except with some music. Okay, thank you, Lou, for sharing that with us. The cabbage game, throwdown, but with some music. You can also throw topics this way. I mean, this could be a great way to do the topics that I had the students all suggest an idea, and then they throw it around, and then that person, when they pick it up, they have to give a 30-second speech about it. So this could be something pretty fun, too. Pass the parcel. Yeah, they can throw it to whoever they want. Okay, so Robin talks about the hot potato pass the parcel game. So see, giving a speech, it doesn't have to be the #1 phobia. We can get over it by doing these really fun games that also get your students to speak. So the great thing about teaching presentation skills is that when you begin the process, when you actually look at it as a process and a long-term kind of thing, then you can incorporate these skills in every class, and it improves listening skills, like Vicki Hollett was saying inside the classroom, inside the chat box. It improves listening skills. It improves critical thinking skills, because they have to get information that's already in their mind. It's from their own experience. It increases vocabulary, because they grab the vocabulary from chunks that they've already learned. It's vocabulary, and they get to use it. It also improves their speaking ability, and it also improves presentation for their jobs. So all of these, and if you do the peer review process, it increases their writing skills, and it also increases their grammar, and it also improves their ability to be able to just design a very good presentation in speech. So thank you for coming today. Have a great weekend. I will be at ISTE. And, oh, Robin, I'm doing digital storytelling with mobile learning devices. So, and I'm going to talk about bring your own device. So bring your own device. It should be a lot of fun. And Robin, or any of you, if I see you here in Philly or IST, please come up to me and wave to me and tell me